Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. It is good to see you. I know this is kind of a weird time. If it's like us, we are coming back from spring break. So we know there are going to be some people that are with us tonight, but we also know some people are traveling and making it back home and coming back after a long Easter week. So you'll be seeing this later on this week or later on this month. But welcome to our Sunday night Slamily gathering. It's wonderful to see you, and we hope you're doing really, really well. We've got an exciting guest with us tonight that I don't want to take any time away from. So I'm going to start it out by asking our founder and CEO and Grand High Poobah, Dr. Tim Lautzenheiser, to give us some opening words.
Thanks, Bobby, and thanks for everybody for showing up and kicking it off again. I missed you the last 2 weeks. We get out of that cadence and it's different. So, a couple things, and based on Scott Rush and I were at Tennessee Music Educators this weekend, and just watching people is such an interesting thing. And in some of the sessions and the commentary afterwards and so forth, one of the things I think we all have to come to grips with, because the reason we come to Slam is to pick up a couple new wrinkles to go back tomorrow, kick it in, and see if we can keep crawling up the backside of the mountain. A few years ago, I was talking to a psychologist who is just brilliant. And he said, well, Tim, now we're talking music people here who are trying to corral the minds and the hearts and the souls of our students. So we're all of like minds focusing in the right direction. He said, well, Tim, you can't change another human. And we've all heard this. And I was like, well, I've been able to change some kids. And he drew the line in the sand. He said, no, you haven't changed anybody. And I'm like, please expound. And he said, you've created a space for them to want to change, but they still make the call. And it was one of those epiphanies to go, he's right. There's only one person we have any control over at all. How many of you are married? Just out of curiosity. Okay, I rest my case. We can control ourselves if we choose to. But thinking we have the power to control another human? Mm-mm. So what's so important about Slam is creating a culture that has so many benefits in it that people want to change. They want to be a part of it. But let's admit, it still comes back to that person. All of our persuasive techniques, etc., that's part of it. But it's still them that has to make the call. So sometimes I think we get frustrated because we put so much time, effort, and energy in getting a person turned around to see it from a different perspective. And, often if we push it too hard, it actually makes it worse instead of better. So let's take control of the one thing we do have, which is ourselves and our attitude about ourselves, and create a situation, a landscape, a climate that benefits everybody who's a member of that nation, in our case, the Slam Nation. And those are my words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's always great to get to start off the meeting with you and start my week off right with those words of wisdom. So thank you very much. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we introduced Mr. Gary Gribble to everyone. If you don't know Gary taught for many years in Marietta, Georgia, and Cobb County. It's a few different schools. Most notably, the last place he taught for many years was Pope High School. And Gary does great work, especially I've seen him clinic bands and come in about 15 minutes, make them sound better, and have the band director walking away going, I can't believe I did that. Just one of those great people that really give a new, fresh perspective, especially something that can be done the next day. So, Mr. Gribble, if you would, give us some tips and tricks that can help us get better tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Last time we talked about programming and discovered that programming is not just selecting literature for a concert, but you program all the various areas of your music organization. So we're going to take that same concept and put it this time on recruiting. And I'll use my personal examples. And obviously these can be, altered to fit whatever situation you're in as far as the cluster of schools that you have, the grade levels that you teach. But when I started out, the typical recruiting for a high school person, which was me and the ones that I observed, was to go in the fall and invite the eighth graders to come to the high school, sit in on a football game one Friday night. Then you don't see them again for who knows how long. And then in the springtime, you go over with your little stack of materials to give them about signing up for high school band. And then you're shocked and amazed that they really don't know much about it. And you're dismayed by the fact that some of them choose not to join. And you can't understand why they're not excited about it. But it's about how you create that culture and that connection. And it's not just during those one or two events. It is an ongoing process. So we have to start thinking of recruiting in, its larger context of how do we approach and how do we make contact and how do we create activities that are going to reach out and connect. So some of the things that we did at Pope, we did joint concerts. So we would take one of our high school ensembles, it could be any, and we asked to be the guest ensemble on one of the middle school concerts. So if the middle school was doing an eighth grade concert, we might take band number 2 from the high school, play on that concert, and we would give one of the pieces of music to the middle school band director to be the guest conductor. They would then often ask us to be the guest conductor for one of the pieces of their eighth grade band. So you're making that connection, getting the kids to know you, all that. One of the other things we did was that we would take our students over in small numbers, 4, 5, 6 kids from our high school to the middle school feeders that came to us at different times during the year, 3, 4 times, 5 times during the year, fall, winter, spring, and it would be a student open forum. So we would tell the high school students, we're not going to script you. We're just going to have you talk about a topic. And your topic is color guard. And your topic is symphonic band and how we approach doing concerts through the year. Your topic is going to be fun band trips. Your topic is going to be marching band. Your topic is going to be academics. And how do you get academics to fit and be in the band? Your topic is going to be how much different is it than what you expected when you were sitting in middle school? And we would just then escort the middle school band directors out of the room into the hallway and talk with them while the students led the exchange and talked to one another. And that way the middle school students were very comfortable asking questions about, is your high school band director really a terrible, jerky monster person like, we're all afraid he's going to be? And the high school students would either confirm that, yes, I was that, or they would say, oh my goodness, no, it's a situation that you're going to love and you're going to really enjoy being there. We would send information. We would ask them to play a short video of a portion of a marching band show or a jazz band performance or one of our chamber ensembles. It didn't have to be much, a minute and a half. But if they had any sort of video capability, if they did their announcements that way, which some of our schools did video announcements, we'd ask them to put that on there for their band students to see. We would give printed materials for their bulletin boards. We would ask them to put material about our events alongside theirs on their websites and their social media sites so that level of communication could be there. And then we would go to our booster parents and say, your job is to make a connection with those middle school parents before they fill out that registration information. So we would approach a parent from our clarinet section and say, here are, contacts for all of the clarinet players in the 8th grade band. Call the parents, set up a parent social, have them come to your house, have them come to your subdivision community room, pick a place to meet, but have those parents come over and just have a social evening, have some snacks, have some adult beverages, and talk about what band has meant to your student and answer their questions. They will have many questions from a parent perspective. They know that the band director is going to give them the answer that they think, the band director wants them to hear. But when they're talking to another parent, and that parent says, my student was shy, and I was afraid when they went to high school they wouldn't have many friends, band gave them friends from every grade level immediately. That was a connection that made a difference. So how you approach this, again, is year-long, continual, and it has to be from the mindset of the day that student is first introduced to music in elementary school until they complete their 12 years of public school education, hopefully going beyond, but not in the context of making them a performer or a teacher, but making them a better consumer and a lifelong consumer of music. So that's my recruiting spiel.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it, Mr. Gribble. Always good. I was sitting here thinking, why don't do a concert with our middle school bands? We actually had them come over to us, and I was like, man, I'd love to take the band over to their place and do a concert. That's like always, giving us great words of wisdom and advice to get us through things that we can do next week. Hey, so to get to our guest speaker tonight, I'll be honest with you, I did not know very much about this person until we looked at booking him a few weeks ago, and I started looking into some of the materials, and you're in for a treat. I'm excited to get to hear him speak on this because I've read several things from him, and I just can't wait to hear how he brings this all to life. So to give you a little bit more information, I think I'm going to kick it over to Steve. Mr. Andre, if you could
Okay.
give us a good introduction of Mr. Tobin, that would be terrific.
Well, great. I first met Tobin at Midwest a few years ago. I was just sitting at the booth waiting for people to come by. And he actually came by, sought us out, and we started talking about leadership. And we hit it off. He is one of us. He believes in culture. And then later he brought me his book, Leading as a Conductor. And if you don't have it, you should buy it and you should read it and you should highlight it like I have, because it is tons of great information. And he was at TMEA this year and he gave a clinic on, I think it was called the Attuned Conductor. Fabulous. Tons of information. He's the director of orchestras at Montana State University and has taught many other places as well, but just a fabulous person that I know you're going to love hearing from. Please welcome Tobin Stewart to our Slam Sunday night gathering.
Thank you. So I've been part of Slam for a while, but I've never been on because we host a group at my home at the very same time. So I always have to watch it after the fact. So I've seen some of you on the screen, but never gotten to interact. So I'm glad to be here tonight. So I'm going to talk about the Attuned Conductor again. And I want to start by taking you back to one of my rehearsals. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I walked into this rehearsal ready to buckle down because the previous rehearsals had not moved us far enough, and we weren't ready, and I was ready to go. Now, my students they're pretty used to fast, focused, efficient rehearsals, but this day they were hanging on for dear life. I was pushing hard, and they just were not giving back in equal measure. And there was not enough energy, and so I increased mine from the podium. The sounds were still not happening and sounding like I wanted, and I was just trying every rehearsal strategy I could think of, and it wasn't working. And it wasn't until my low back kind of sounded this alarm of pain that I stopped long enough to really read myself or to read the room. Because I was so fixed on my agenda and my lesson plan that completely eclipsed the needs and realities of my players in the room that day. I was not well attuned, I was not well aware, and I was not leading well. Had I thought a little bit more and realized where we were in the semester and how many exams and projects and things they were dealing with, it probably would have explained their kind of dazed looks and their lack of energy. Had I taken a little bit more time as we were setting up stage to actually dialogue and talk and listen, I probably would have picked up on their mental fatigue. Had I been more aware of what I was doing in trying to increase energy on the podium and what was happening with my gestures, I would have realized I was actually creating more anxiety and tension in them than anything else. Had I been more aware, I'd have realized that the pace at which I was moving in that rehearsal was actually keeping them from listening and responding and being aware of each other. So in a sense, all the things that I was doing was going against what I was hoping to have happen in that rehearsal. Again, I was not leading well. It's no wonder they were not making the sounds that I was hoping to hear. I'm going to try to share my screen here so you can all see. Again, I'm going to talk about the Attuned Conductor. And hopefully you're all seeing it there. We talk a lot in our world about tuning and intonation. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. This is attunement, which means being aware of and attentive to and responsive to someone or something. So we're tuned in, but in this case, we're not tuned into pitch. We're tuned into somebody else and to ourselves. So I want to look at three different areas. First, self-awareness, inside and out. And what I mean by that is what's going on in our own heads, especially. That's the inside part. The out would be what are our gestures? And are we aware actually of what our gestures are doing and showing? Then we'll talk a little bit about awareness of others, and then how do we cultivate this in an ensemble? And so the first most important thing, self-awareness. We are all unique. You are all unique. You have your own personality, which means that you're going to lead and teach and conduct in a different way than the person next to you. And if you hear nothing else tonight, what I want you to hear is that is a beautiful thing. And you should embrace that fact and be you and not try to be somebody else. So the first step of attunement is just knowing, what is your bent? What are your tendencies? What are your strengths and weaknesses so that you can lead from your strengths? So if you haven't done these already, I really encourage you to do strengths inventories, personality profiles to figure out and learn about yourself. And the reason these are really helpful is they help you know how do you process information, how do you communicate, and how do you interact with people? Because you do that differently than everybody else on the screen. And knowing how you do that, I think, is really important and the first step. Now, I will also say, though, you could go to, a full 3 or 4 day training on the disc profile and learn everything about your disc profile and understand that and how you can implement that as a teacher and still not be well attuned. So that's a first step, but I think we need to dig a little deeper and ask these questions. Why are you that way? And how did you get that way? What were the things that influenced the development of who you have become today? Those are some really important questions to ask. So before we go on, I love images, and I think they often tell us more than words do. And I love the iceberg, and we've all seen it before, that what is above the surface is so much less than what is below the surface. And there's so much underneath that's supporting what's above. And I think that's absolutely true of humans. That we see a little bit, but there's so much deeper inside that we don't all know about each other, and even ourselves sometimes. So I think we got to dig beneath the surface and ask a lot of these why questions. I love the author Tim Elmore. If you don't know Tim Elmore, I encourage you to look him up. He's got some books. They're called Habitudes, which is his way of squishing together habits and attitudes into one word. And they're awesome little short books. You should check them out. But one of them, he talks about the fact that we all carry around 4 images. And the first one is the true image. That's the real us. But then many of us have this image that we want to be true of ourselves. If we're not always happy with our true self, or we like what we see from somebody else, or we want to be that, we want something else. And then there's the image that we project, and often based on number 2, if it's a different image than who we really are, we often try to project certain things to the world. And then, of course, there's the image that people actually see when they're looking at us. And so the question is really, why isn't there just one image? Why isn't there just the true image? And that's what we see and believe and trust and accept, and that's what the world sees. Why are there layers that get added on, or that interrupt, or that protect, or that distort, or that confuse that true image? And these are important questions to ask. So good attunement, I believe, is starting with knowing our strengths and weaknesses, but it goes beyond to asking these questions. Why are there layers on top of my true self? Why do I project different things? Why do certain things trigger me in certain ways? And why do these questions matter? I think because we are not just in the business of notes and rhythms. We are all about interacting with and connecting with people. And just like you have all these layers involved with you, so do they, especially when they're in middle school and high school. And so if we really want to connect with others, it starts, I think, with really good attunement of ourselves, so that we can then attune to them and be able to encourage them. So it takes a lot of reflection, I think, and going below the surface. All right, so let's get out of theory for a second. And I want to actually ask this question, why do some of these things happen? Well, there's that true self, and you see from the circles, there's just life has happened, and you often deal with covering up or coping or doing things because you've realized to be accepted, or in this environment, I have to be this way or do this, or to be noticed, I have to do this, or to not be noticed, I have to do this. And we've developed these layers, and that gets rather complex. So let's dig into a rehearsal scenario. How does all this play out when you're teaching? So what I want you to do as I present this scenario is, how would you naturally respond? And I don't want you to overthink it. Just what's the first thing that comes to mind? What would your natural response be? And then try to think about why. Why is that your first and most natural response? Okay, here's the scenario. Student arrives late to rehearsal for the 5th time and appears disengaged as usual. So again, think about how would you naturally respond to the situation? What comes to mind first? And then give yourself a second to kind of think about why. Why is that response? And if we had more time, I'd love to hear everybody's response, because I bet we'd have 15 different answers, or however many people are in the room. We would have that many different responses. But let me just tackle this in 2 different ways, and look at it first from a personality level, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So some of you love process and procedure. And you just, you think very black and white, and you think about there's certain behaviors and then there's certain consequences, and that's the way it is. And so you're just going to deal with this pretty matter of factly that, okay, they're late, and you're going to slap on whatever consequence there is, and you don't think much more beyond that. Now, some of you that you don't relate to that at all, on a different level, completely different personality. Some of you can't follow processes or procedures at all. You don't even know it's the 5th tardy. But what you want to do is you want to go find the student right away and start talking to them and asking them questions and getting under, like, what's going on? What's happening here? So that's just 2 possibilities based on personality and how your brain works on how you're going to tackle this situation. But let's dig a little deeper. Let's go under the surface of the iceberg. On another level, what if this triggers you to some level? So some of you are going to be triggered by the fact that that student has come in late 5 times. Because for you, that's disrespectful and it's disrupting your ensemble. You're trying to tune or whatever, and they're coming in late and they're crashing through, and you get a little frustrated or irritated or angered by that. So that's what kind of triggers inside you and comes up. Important to ask why. What's that trigger all about? Some of you, that may not trigger you at all, but what triggers you is the disengagement. And you're looking at that going, that stirs something inside. And for some, that might mean actually beating yourself up, because you're like, darn it, I haven't connected with this kid. I haven't lit a fire in them. They are not having fun in my classroom, and I've failed them in some way. Some of the rest of you might be a different response. You might say, all right, this is a challenge. I'm going to take 2 weeks. I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to get them. I'm going to get a fire lit. I'm going to figure out how to change them and actually get them engaged. So you can see from this, we can look at it from just personality. That's going to impact how you respond to that student, but also some of the other things that might come up from that behavior that might trigger you might also impact how you're going to respond. So when we need to and want to attend well to others, the first step is we got to be aware of what's going on inside of us, knowing just about ourselves and our personality, but also knowing what are the things that trigger us and why. And that really just comes from taking some time of reflection. So some suggestions with that. First and foremost, slow down. When we interact situations, and especially if they're stressful, we tend to respond reflexively rather than intentionally. And if we ever want to break that reflexive cycle, we've got to slow down and create some space between stimulus and response so we can decide, how do I actually want to respond in this situation instead of what just instinctively comes out of me. It's important to feel the feelings. Okay, if you do get annoyed or irritated or triggered in some way, why? That feeling's in there. And so if we just shove it down and just move on, it doesn't help. So we got to feel them. We got to think about them. Don't fix until you know how to fix. We got to seek to understand what's going on so we can apply that right fix. And then always ask meaningful questions with curiosity, not judgment. And that's both towards you and towards them. So I think reflection is really important, and would encourage you to take some time reflecting on some of these things about how do you lead, what are your strengths, and how do you respond, and why, and what comes out. I think that's a great first step before we can then attune to others. All right, jump into gestures a little bit. I think that we as conductors, our job is to elicit sounds from an ensemble by what we do with our gestures. And so how we breathe and how we move are really important, because it impacts how they breathe and how they move, which is how they make sounds. So my big question is, how do you do with ease, balance, and freedom in your movement? Think back to my rehearsal scenario that I described at the beginning. I didn't have ease, balance, or freedom. If I did, my back wouldn't have screamed at me in pain. And when we have pain, it's because you're not in balance and freedom. You're not moving correctly. And so your body is telling you something is wrong. Um, and so how do we do with those things? I think is really important because it will impact the players and singers and however they breathe and how they move. So I want to try something really fast. And I think body scanning, I don't know if any of you have ever tried this, but it can be a super simple thing. So if you would, just close your eyes. And I want you, as your eyes are closed, to breathe in and, maybe 3 counts or so, and breathe in through your nose and then breathe out for more counts than you took to get in. So say you take 3 breaths in and you maybe take 4 or 5 breath or counts out, and just keep doing that at your own pace. And if you can breathe through your nose, it's a little bit more relaxing that way. And then as you do this, I want you just to start kind of paying attention to your body and what things do you notice? And are there any places in your body where you're realizing, wow, I'm kind of tense there, or I'm kind of holding that, and I could probably let that go. Maybe I don't need to hold that there. Are there any, like, do I notice, wow, maybe my shoulders are kind of creeping up and I can let those down, or maybe I'm gripping here and I don't need to grip there. Is there any place where you can find release and you don't have to hold, you don't have to be tense, and just let that go? This is just a simple way to do some body scans. And I think it's important. Um, and feel free, you can open your eyes now. Sometimes people have given feedback to this and they're like, this is all great when I'm sitting alone and I'm sitting in my chair, but when I'm in the middle of rehearsals, when I actually get tense and I can't just stop and do this. To which my question is, why not? And why not take your entire ensemble through it? Why not teach them to relax? Because they're doing a lot of things that create a whole lot of tension in them as they're doing this. And so if you notice tension in your body and feel like, wow, I could really take some breaths and release right now, I bet they are too. So why not take 30 seconds and have the entire group do it? You don't even have to tell them it's because you want to relax. You can just tell them it's helping everybody relax a little bit. So why not take some time to do that? Another thing that I love to do is practice conducting with eyes closed. Now, we always learn, I think, in our conducting, and I teach my students this all the time, use a mirror, use a mirror, use a mirror, conduct in front of a mirror so you see what's going on. It's really good. That's really important. But what I find when I'm in front of a mirror and I'm practicing, my analytical brain goes on and I'm looking at everything and I'm thinking, I don't like that. I'm going to fix that. And I'm just, my brain's doing all the work. But when I close my eyes, all of a sudden I can start to sense and feel things in my body better. So as I'm conducting along with my eyes closed, I'll notice like, oh, I'm gripping here. Like I don't need to grip there. I could relax that. Or I'm feeling tension come in here. And when my analytical brain's going, sometimes I don't feel those things until an alarm sounds later. And so closing my eyes as I practice conducting often allows me to sense and feel what's actually happening in my body. So I challenge you to try that. Another drill that I think is really good with your ensemble, and I love to do this during warm-ups, don't tell them anything about what you're trying to communicate, just show it. So it could be as simple as have them do a scale, but show them the articulation, show them the dynamics, show them the tempo, and do all these things. And if they're responding, you're showing it well. If they're not responding, you're probably not showing it well. So don't say, I want you to play loud here, or I want you to play staccato here, or I want you just show it, show what you want, and see if they respond. So that's really good instant feedback. Are my gestures communicating what I think they're communicating, and are they getting it? So doing a lot with that. And it could be as simple as a scale, but it could also be a unison melody. It could be chorale things. You can do all kinds of things, but you create what you want to happen without telling them verbally. You just tell them with your gestures. Another great one is to record yourself, which we're told this all the time to record and watch. But one thing that could be helpful with this is not only record and watch, but as you're watching, pick up an instrument and then sit down and play as if you're playing in the ensemble. So pick up your own instrument if you want, turn yourself on, put the trumpet part in front of you, for example, and start playing the trumpet part and watch and see how are you inspired to breathe and move as you watch the conductor, who is you. Is it, inspiring you to breathe in a way that produces the best sound? Or do you feel like maybe you're carrying in tension or taking on tension from what you're seeing? Are you seeing the things communicated that you thought as you watch as a player? And sometimes I think I pick up more that way than if I just kind of, again, analyze myself as conductor watching conductor. Be a player in your ensemble. And then last, another great one is take videos and send them to other people and say, would you please give me feedback? What do you see in my gestures? And the best thing when you do this is to give them some specifics that you want them to look at and give feedback on. And, maybe it's about, do you see ease and balance and freedom in my gestures, or do you see tension? Or do you see that I'm being clear with this or that? And so that you give them something very specific to give feedback on. All right. So far, this session has been all about ourselves. And that's intentional, because if we don't have our stuff together, then we don't really know what we're doing in front of others. And so it takes some time to give a lot of reflection and a lot of thought and practice in what we do so that we have our stuff together. The ultimate goal, though, is I don't want to think about me at all. When I'm in front of the ensemble, I don't have to think about my conducting. I don't want to have to think about how I respond to stuff, because I want my focus fully on the ensemble, or as much as I possibly can in the ensemble. So that's why we got to do our work separate on ourselves, so that when I'm in there, I can give them everything I've got. So here's what I want to challenge you in thinking about awareness of others, is to make a to-be list. Most of us have to-do lists. I clearly had a to-do list in that rehearsal, and I was so focused on my to-do list. But what if we had a to-be list? And what I mean by that is, think about who you want to be. And I put a few examples here on the screen. These aren't the things that I want to do in rehearsal. It's more of, how do I want to be as a person? So I don't do calm. It's a way of being if I'm in rehearsal. I don't do curiosity, like I check that off my list. It's a way of being as I'm in my rehearsal. So thinking about creating a to-be list with like some of these words here, and really focusing on, who do you want to be as a teacher, as a conductor? So think about that rehearsal again that I described at the beginning. What would have been a whole lot better about that rehearsal if even just those 4 words were more a part of who I was that day? So think about how much more aware of my students I would have been had there been a whole lot more curiosity going on inside of me that day. Or what would have changed if I'd had a lot more compassion in who I was that day? Or what would have been more successful if my pace was a lot more calm instead of ramped up to where it was? Now, one caveat here, I do think that fast pace is often really good, really helpful. And I'm not ever advocating that we lower our musical standards. I think musical excellence is always the goal of what we're doing. But that day, I was driving so hard for musical excellence, and I was pushing so fast, and I was lacking some of these to-be things that I was not getting what I wanted. Whereas if I'd had more curiosity about why the sounds were not happening the way they were, that would have allowed me to stop and change my course of action that day and actually find more success. Which, by the way, I did, because when we finally took a break and I had a little time to assess and realize, when I came back, I pulled back the pace and we changed some stuff. But in the first part of that rehearsal, I was missing a lot of these to-be things that I wanted, and I wasn't getting the goal that I was after. Now, one other warning about this, some of you, especially if you're big on your to-do lists, some of you are going to say, I already have my huge list, and now you're asking me also to be calm. And it's adding another thing to your list that you need to do. And so what I want you to think about with this to-be list is to let it be a litmus test for you. Because I believe that when we're operating at our very best, that your real, true you is going to be what we see. And if it's not, then let yourself ask the question, what's getting in the way? What is disturbing the calm, curious, courageous, compassionate self that you want to be, or whatever other words you have on your to-be list? What is interrupting that if that's not what's coming forward? That's the question we want to ask. So here's some practical suggestions in the area of our gestures. Stop conducting. If you want to get your focus off of yourself and more onto them, then just stop conducting and don't even do any of the conducting. This for you allows you to not think about the score, not think about your gestures, not think about any of that, but just give your full attention to just watching and listening and paying attention to them. So stop doing what you're doing up front, empower them to go, and they'll be fine, and just give all of your attention to them. Use more curiosity. Just ask tons of questions. Like, it would have helped me that day if I stopped and said, what would you guys need today? What would be helpful for you? What would make this rehearsal better? And I probably would have gotten a lot of good ideas. And the more you ask questions, maybe they're going to come up with some rehearsal strategies you hadn't thought of, or maybe they just need a break, or maybe they're even going to say, we just need to go home and practice. And let them own it, and we're going to come back to this tomorrow or the next time. So use lots of questions. Move around the room. Just that different perspective helps you realize and understand so many things. And again, sit down and play or sing in the ensemble so that you're a member of the group. Let somebody else conduct or nobody conduct, and just help, it gets you your ears somewhere else. It hears and think in a different way. All right. Last section, I want to talk just a bit about developing ensemble awareness. One of the things I love to do here, and I wish I had a whole time in person because that would be the easiest, but I love doing team building drills, team building activities that have nothing to do with music, and they also have everything to do with music. And I'm sure you've done a bunch of these before, and so many times you can take any of these team building communication kind of drills and just do them with your group, and then talk about, okay, how does this relate to music? How does this connect to music? How is this, what can we learn that we can pull in from music? And maybe with some time here in a second, we can talk more about those if you want. But I love doing those activities, those team things that get students engaged in some way, and then we tie it back and we relate it to music. Now, some of the things for ensemble awareness are almost the same list that I had before as far as suggestions. And that first one is stop conducting. And again, this purpose is not so much for your ears, but when you stop conducting and you treat your ensemble more like a chamber group, it forces them to step up and have to listen and watch and be more aware of each other. It's really humbling for me that often when something's not working well, it's not jiving well, it's not clicking, and I stop conducting, it gets better. It's humbling as a conductor to think, well, why does it get better? Well, the reason it gets better is because now they're listening more. Now they're watching more. Their attention just went way up. And so they had to make it work. Whereas sometimes when we're just up here giving them everything, their brains go off and they're not listening and they're not paying attention. They're not aware of each other. And so when we stop, and I don't care if you have 5 people or 105, the more you can train them to be chamber players and play like chamber players all the time, they're going to be more aware of each other. Again, use that curiosity, ask tons of questions. Instead of in rehearsal, always telling and telling and telling, what if you stop and you just always pull that information by asking and asking and asking? What do we need more here? Or who can we not hear right now? Or what would happen if we did this here? And all these kinds of questions where you're drawing out of them the answers that you want, that's going to make them have to step up their awareness. Again, move around. And sometimes that's just being close to other people. So they have to step up and be aware, like, oh, I gotta pay attention again. Or again, play or sing in the ensemble and be in this time a demonstrator of what it means to be aware and to listen. Okay, I want to just close with one story. I was a junior in high school and I was playing trumpet, and I was first trumpet in this honor band. And kind of situation where we had a guest conductor, college conductor that came in for this honor band. And at one point in that rehearsal, I missed an entrance. And this conductor, who I won't say who his name was, but he was very well known. And he was in the very last year of his 30-some career at his institution. Big name. And so I missed this entrance. He steps off the podium and he points his finger straight at me. And with kind of this scowl in his brow, he says, "Son, your job is to lead. And what kind of example do you think you're setting right now when you miss an entrance because you're not listening and you're not focusing?" I felt about this big. I wanted to climb under my chair. I wanted to walk away. I couldn't wait for that honor band experience to be over. I wanted nothing more to do with that conductor. Now, I don't know if he was fully aware of what he was doing in that moment. He might have been, because I don't think anybody missed another entrance for the rest of that whole festival. And if that was his intent, it worked. But if his intent was to actually have me step up and be a leader, as he was saying, it didn't work at all. It destroyed me and crushed me. So my hope is that I've given you some thoughts and some ideas here to think about how you can connect with students in a way that's going to encourage them and empower them to play well. And I think that takes a lot of attunement about ourselves so that we can then be attuned to them to push them to do this at their best. I do have some questions if we're going to do some breakout, and I realize I just stopped sharing. Maybe I should reshare once again to show you those questions.
And actually, excuse me, Tobin, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think what we may do is, since we have a little bit of a smaller group tonight, we may, if it's okay with you, to do some of those together.
Great.
And we like to kind of take a step back and talk about the leadership tenets that we already talk about in SLAM, and go through those. But then it would be great to maybe go through those questions together, or if you're okay with allowing some of the folks to ask questions as well. Is that okay?
Awesome.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm going to interrupt it just for a second. First of all, I felt like I went to my therapist, my mentor, my college band director, at like all in one visit in about 15, 20 minutes. Like, there are things that you were saying in there that were bringing all my worlds together. And I loved how you were saying, that inward look. And if we can really address that, it has profound effect on the outside rather than trying to affect the outside. So, wow, that's fantastic. Cecilia Clark, I would love for you to give us a little bit of a thought about some of our leadership tenets, and then we'll turn it right back to you, Tobin, to do some of those questions, if that's okay.
And really, Tobin, wow, that was fantastic. And I'm with Bobby. Just so many pages of notes while I'm sitting here myself. And I think that it's really interesting. And it's not even interesting. I think it's something that all of us here in SLAM, we find to be at the heart of who we are as leaders for our program, that you talked so much about making those connections. Yeah, Tim's absolutely right. We talk about that all the time, relationships, right? The idea that in order for us to get to a place where we can even make those corrections, if we want to call them corrections, there has to be connections first, right? I want to take a moment to actually, because at this time of year, there are a lot of us that in the public school world, we're kind of simultaneously wrapping up the end of the year and celebrating our seniors and final performances and all the things that we do at the end of the year. But we're simultaneously gearing up for the next year. So a lot of us in this time are also looking at making choices in terms of our student leadership teams. And I think that it's important for us here at SLAM to pause and say, leadership development is how you amplify your culture. All of us are trying to build a culture of excellence, and we've got to be really invested in our student leaders and developing the right team. We of course everybody wants to know that their leaders are competent and they're confident, without a doubt, right? We want that. But are they also students that demonstrate humility? And at the end of the day, is your student leadership team there to grow more leaders? right? Are they going to be the students who represent the culture that you want to create, where they're investing in making connections in order to be able to provide feedback to their peers? I think that without that kind of discipline from your student leadership team, it's the idea between like, what's the difference between surgeons and vampires, right? They're both extracting blood, but one in a very different way than the other. So if we want to get to that point where our student leadership team, they're an extension of our instructional staff, our directors, for instance, then we've got to make sure that we're really choosing wisely those student leaders that are going to grow other leaders. And they're doing that because they're making those connections first. And I will just shout out kind of indirectly and directly to Gary Gribble. One of his former students released a book just about 2 weeks ago. I love this place. Y'all, this was spring break for me. I actually finished 4 books this week, but this was right. But this was one that took like a day and a half. And I'm a note taker. My part-time job, I think I should be like a graphic note taker. And I'll put the link in the chat. When you go to Amazon, you buy the book, you get a Sharpie to go along with the book. But this is us, y'all. Patrick Irwin has taken his 17 years of band directing experience, which started as a student teacher with Gary, right? How many years ago was that? Years ago? Yeah.
Yeah,
One
he
of
was
our
student teacher and adjunct staff with us. Yeah.
Yeah, one of our colleagues in Cobb County, and just really, really fantastic. Amplify your school culture to reignite staff, reconnect students, and rally community. Wow, that's everything right now. Ooh, Bobby,
Thank you, Cecilia. That's awesome. And I just had to write down what that book was, and I'll just tell Patrick, hey man, send me one. Because that's awesome, terrific. Tobin, one of the things that strikes me, and as you go back into going through these questions with us, I wonder if you think about these questions not only for yourself but with your student leaders. Do you go through this kind of process when you're talking to them about how they self-analyze and how they work together?
Yeah, and I love what Cecilia's just saying. Like we've got to, if we want our student leaders to lead well, we've got to train them. And so I absolutely do training with my college leaders, and we keep connecting and reconnecting, and sometimes I have them for several years, and so the more I have them, the more they catch the culture I'm trying to create. But that's absolutely, yeah. And that's one of the things I love about my job the most, is kind of training up more leaders. And I also love that I get to teach music educators, because I'm essentially trying to, have them carry that on. But yeah, absolutely.
So, what are some of those questions that you were talking about that maybe could help us reflect or identify?
Yeah, and if anybody wants to go a different direction, that's totally fine. But I was just going to ask, and they're all kind of around this. The first one being, who are you striving to be? That's kind of the big question. Who are you striving to be? And then there's kind of 3 sub questions that are all related to that. In which ways do you distort, diminish, or magnify your true image? And if so, why? And again, that why question is really important. Like if I'm projecting a different image than my true image, why am I doing that? The second one is, how does comparison impact you? Because I think in our field of music, it's everywhere, and comparison is, I hate it. It's so destructive. It either makes me feel lesser because I think I don't measure up to that person, or it makes me start to feel proud because I feel like I'm better. Like, I don't think it ever leads us anywhere good, to comparison. And so how do you deal with that in our world? Because I think it impacts all of us. And then, how might a to-be list change the way how you teach, lead, or conduct? Again, those are all kind of getting back to, who do you really want to strive to be?
I think it's so interesting because I could imagine myself asking Bobby in year 3 of teaching, who do you want to be? And at the time, I wouldn't know. If I'm really honest with you, I wouldn't know what the answer was. I could look to some of those people in my life that were real heroes and mentors and say, okay, I would like to be that. And I think, I guess my point is, I don't think you have to have the answer ready right now, but you have to have something of like, I want to be the kind of person who does this. I want to be the kind of person who does that. I know we're talking with my student leaders about not necessarily setting goals, but trying to define the person you are and who you project. That's that's awesome. I want to open it up for some questions if anybody has some. I've got plenty, but I think Tim is burning at it right now. Please, Tim, jump on in.
Thanks, Bobby. And thanks, Cecilia. Tobin, it's so interesting that the story you told was was about something negative. Positives come and go, negatives accumulate. And what probably the person had no idea the damage he or she was doing. It was because maybe some of his or her mentors did that.
Mm.
And I think we're all guilty. And then afterwards, we try to unfire the gun, which is impossible, of course, to do. And if, boy, that is so loud because I still watch people use that technique because you can get people to move quickly out of fear. But there's still a scar left, isn't there, buddy?
Yeah.
So related to that, Tim, I don't know about you, but I think everybody on the call probably heard Tobin talk about that, and there was like this little flashback moment that's happened in your rehearsal where something like that happened, right? So Tim, what's the statistic? How many positives does it take just to get back to neutral after one of those Bobo negative moments?
Yeah, it's supposed to be 8 to 1. And now they're even stretching it further. And that you really never do get back because you build up a shield of defensiveness as we all do because we're animals, we're survival creatures. Yeah. Thank you, David, for saying that.
So to me, it just of all the things that are on our to-do lists, especially now, like what Cecilia was talking about, the biggest burden is that we're ending and starting. So we think life is supposed to get easier because assessment is over, but it really doesn't, right? That's just a myth. But how do we be intentional in finding that reflective space? And this time of year, I think um, I'm in that mode because I had the chance to go spend some time in a beautiful place, and it was like, hello, stupid, be reflective. Like it was like a no brainer. But we need to make time, and in this time of year, I think to Tobin's point, we need to spend more time with more frequency of asking that question: what is our to be list, and how am I going to equip students to be that also in my classroom through my rehearsal? Because there's always such a huge demand, isn't there? Like we almost need that to be on a reminder that goes off like every hour of our 4 words or how many of our words on our to be list, because there's so many distractions and opportunities in all of your gigs that you have to bump us off track, so to speak. Yeah, that's really great, Tobin. Thank you so much on that. I saw an analogy this morning about our mission. Like if you're on a freeway or like it was like going through the national park. There's the divided highway and the little striped line. That's your mission, and then the guardrail so you don't fall off the mountain. Those are your values. And to me, I'm almost thinking about this would be another great analogy of the striped line is our path of who we want to be, and those words, if we keep them in front of us, are our guardrails to keep us on track with who we want to be as we get daily distractions.
Tobin, I have a quick question before we run out of time. As I'm hearing you talk through all these things, I can't help but think score study plays a huge part in being able to be attuned to what's going on. Do you have a minute to talk about score study and how those two are related to each other?
Absolutely. I think it's so important. And I never have enough time. I don't feel like I ever have enough time, but I devote a lot of time to it. And yeah, the more we know it, the more we can do it, then the easier it is I think, like I mentioned before, if we don't have our stuff together, then we're not effective to go in front of a class. And that's one of those pieces. Like if I don't know my score, then I'm distracted and I'm looking at the score and I just don't have as much prepared. And so the better I know it, the more I can be out of it, the more my eyes and ears can be up, the more I know what I want. And it absolutely helps. So my best rehearsals are the days that I know the score is the best. And the worst rehearsals are the days when I'm just scrambling. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Tobin, I was struck when you said this. My dad was a carver. He made things out of wood, and he could make all kinds of things. And he's passed, and some of my prized possessions now are things that he carved, and they're beautiful. He tried to teach me how to do it, and I am not a carver, but he started me by doing baseball bats, like just little baseball bats like this, and how to shape it and do. And one of the things that I've kind of come back to as a father and as a teacher at this point was he knew it so well, he could do it just about any way. Like I could start it and I would mess it up, and he was so adept, so attuned that he could fix my mistake. I find that when I am prepared in going into these rehearsals, like you were just saying, and like Steve, I think, was alluding to, then I have the flexibility to shift and change. When I only have one idea, I have to get to letter D in this piece, there's no flexibility that can come with it. So I love how there's this yin and yang of where I think if some people heard this, they might say, well, okay, it can't just be about the kids. You're right. It is still about the music, but if the kids aren't in the right place, it's never going to be about the music. So I love how you were able to kind of wrap those two things together. And we talk about a culture of excellence in all of the materials that we do. And because they have to go together, it can't just be, a social club. It's great to love the place, but there have to be reasons that you love the place and things that you can give back. So I love how you've really kind of wrapped all of this together and made it even more palpable for me. So thank you for that. We really, truly appreciate your time and your wisdom tonight, Tobin. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you want more, Tobin has a book. Tobin, do you want to tell them how and where they can get that?
Yeah, it's through GIA, but you can go right to Amazon and get that book. So yeah, Leading as a Conductor with Integrity of Heart and Skillful Hands. And basically what I've done in that book is each chapter is one word. And I just went through and picked 14 words that I thought were words that applied to leaders, not necessarily music people, but just good leaders. And then I tie in each chapter, how does that apply to as a conductor? And where this initially started was with I wanted to teach leadership in my conducting class, because I realized so often in conducting class, we teach technique and we teach score study. But what we do as conductors is lead people. And if we're no good at leading people, it doesn't matter how good this is. And so I've started doing leadership in my conducting classes. So that's where it initiated. And I would pull these materials in from all these places. And then, okay, how does this relate to us on the podium? And so finally, at one point, I was like, I should just write, kind of write my own. And so that's where it started. So, I talk about
You did.
We're
really glad you did. I know Cecilia has put in the chat a link to that. So if you want to, while we're closing up right now, jump to that. Steve and David, I was wondering if you might say something maybe about our next speaker and possibly about some of our summer plans that we have coming up.
Okay, well, I'll talk about next week. We're going back to back because the way Easter fell and spring break. So next week is a repeat guest who is one of my heroes, Melody Villegas. Melody is a rock star choir director. She teaches at AC New Middle School, which is 90% free and reduced lunch. She took over the program. Now I take credit because I hired her. You see people comment and you go, well,
It's all about you, Steve. It's all about you.
She has, and what's amazing is her choirs have sung at ACDA and TMEA, and I know she's had lots of offers to leave, but she stays at AC New because she has a heart for those kids, and what she's done there is amazing. So Melody's going to be back with us next Sunday. And you don't want to miss it because Scott liked her so much from the last time. He hired her be on the Habits Choral Series book, right, Scott? How was that working with Melody on that?
She's fantastic. She is absolutely, and I can't say enough good things about her. Yep.
So tell your friends, you're going to love it.
Absolutely.
David, you want to talk about our two summer events?
Yeah, we have an email coming out on Tuesday, so you can check it all out, or you can go to our website, slamculture.org, and find out more about it. But really excited. We're having two staff development, workshop, training, whatever your district needs you to call it, in person, face-to-face for 2 days, an intensive, collaborative, interactive time on crafting culture. So it's the base of the book, but how do we take the ideas and the 5 tenets in the book, but how do we actually get to talk about it face to face? And how do we get to talk about how to deliver it with more practical, tangible ways? This will be our 4th summer presenting. This summer, we're going to be in Atlanta and El Paso. And if you will, there's going to be a great discount code in Tuesday's email. And so I want to encourage you, if you're interested at all, some of you on the call have been in person, and I'd really encourage you to share it with folks that you know, especially if you are going to go, but because it's always better to do something like that with a colleague and a buddy. But my point is that you have permission to share that code and that discount to others that you feel like would really benefit by that. And so, Tim, we're still finalizing some things about the El Paso. The dates are set in, but the faculty, we're still finalizing some of that. But in Atlanta, Tim will be here. Taylor, Cecilia, and I will be sharing those 5 tenets on those 2 days. So basically, it starts on at lunch, so you can have time to fly in or get in if you need to, and then spend one night and then be finished before dinner so you can get back out if you need to try to minimize those expenses. So we'd love to have you be a part of that. Tuesday, keep an eye out for the email for the information, or you can go in advance, slamculture.org, and find out more.
David and Steve, thank you both for being the guardrails for us in this organization. You always keep me within the lines, which I need to all the time. And thank you for all the work that you do for SLAM and have done for SLAM for years now. So thank you both for that. Tim, do you want to give some closing remarks to send us on our way?
Just echo everything was said tonight. Tobin, great job, buddy. Just super job. And it's just great to be with like minds. And that's why this summer, come and be a part of one of these culture events. I haven't had anybody that left yet that wasn't jazzed, including myself. So yeah, but again, what a special night. What a special night. So no, let's wrap it up.
Also, just bring your colleagues, bring somebody to have fun with at these events. Bring your choir director, bring your orchestra director, bring your band director, or bring your friend who you want to laugh with a lot, because we tend to do that quite a bit in these sessions. So from all of us, Tobin, again, words aren't enough. Really thank you for sharing your heart with us and the way that you've given back to music education. Even as an orchestra director, we still take you, us in the band world. We oftentimes don't think we have anything to learn from orchestra folks, but you showed that plenty tonight, that you have so much to give. Thank you infinitely for that. Everybody have a wonderful week. We hope to see you back next week, not in 2 weeks, but next week we'll be here with Melanie. So take care. Have a great week.